Hey, what's up, y'all? This is episode 2 of the Higgs Flicks podcast. Man, let me tell you something. Because I am out of the job, and since I can't go to school right now, I have been watching an obscene amount of shows and movies on Netflix. I still have yet to get to the Tiger King guy, but I have every intention of watching that very soon and doing a review. I just, for some reason, have been putting it off. But anyway, because of COVID-19, there have been a lot of movies that have been pushed back because they can't release it in cinemas. Like that happened to Black Widow. Who knows when that's going to come out now. And some movies have even gone straight to streaming. And that's where this review is going today, because Onward was released about a week before all the movie theaters closed down. And if you aren't aware, Onward is the latest film by PIXAR. And it was in theaters for a while, but then COVID-19 happened, and Disney was like, well, I mean, we want people to see this movie. And so, rather than cutting their losses, they put it straight on their Disney Plus streaming service. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think this was the perfect movie to put on a streaming site, because it's not the greatest movie from Pixar. Like, it's not the worst, but it's certainly not the best. But anyway, let's get started with this episode. Onward is directed by Dan Scanlon, who up to this point, he only has a couple of directing credits to his name. He's the one who gave us Monsters University, as well as the Pixar short Mater and the Ghostlight. So really, this is his first time directing a movie that isn't already based on an existing IP. So for that, I have to commend him. How well does he do? Let's find out. The film is about two brothers, voiced by Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, aka Spider-Man and Star-Lord. They live in a land that used to be full of magic, but over time, They live in a land that used to be full of magic and wonder, but over time, as technology progressed, people began to lose their need for magic. The older brother, voiced by Chris Pratt, he loves magic. He thinks it's the coolest thing ever. He plays D&D with his buddies, and he calls all of his road trips quests. His younger brother, on the other hand, voiced by Tom Holland, is the exact opposite. He's more into the modern stuff, and he just wants to go to college and live a normal life. This all changes when Tom Holland's character receives a magic staff for his 16th birthday that can grant him the ability to see his deceased father for one day. Unfortunately, performing the spell goes horribly wrong, so brothers Ian and Barley have to go on a cross-country road trip to finish the spell so they can see their dad one last time before sunset. Now here's what I will say. The best thing that Onward has going for it is the physical comedy, specifically with Ian and Barley's dad. Because the reason the spell goes horribly wrong is the crystal used for doing the spell explodes halfway through, meaning only the bottom half actually goes through. So throughout the whole movie, Ian and Barley have to cover the top half of it somehow, so they create this, like, makeshift top half made out of, like, jackets and stuff, creating this sort of Weekend at Bernie's situation. And I'm gonna be honest, it's a simple running joke that absolutely had me dying every single time. Like, this and Toy Story 4 might be the funniest of the Pixar films. Another thing this movie did well is how these characters are portrayed. Take, for instance, the older brother. He's super nerdy despite having the build and attitude of this dude bro type. It's not a big thing, but I did appreciate it a lot. I also got a kick out of every scene with the Manticore, voiced by Octavia Spencer. She used to be this warrior back in the day, but the modern world has made her soft, and she's basically a Chuck E. Cheese manager, and she's more concerned with her stock portfolio than taking down tribes. And I don't know, it was super amusing to see such a big character kind of play against type. With that being said, it does bring me to some of the negatives I have with this movie. And the first thing is kind of an unfair criticism, since it is the setup, and I try to give the setup a little more leeway, but I have to talk about it. But I never really care for movies where it's basically the real world with a handful of fantastical elements. The most recent time I remember this happening is, funny enough, Dan Scanlon's last movie, Monsters University. The movie takes place at a college for monsters, but it looks like any other college. And the same goes for this. It takes place in a town that forgot all about magic, but I don't know, they could have added more fantastical elements. Like, the first 5 minutes of this movie looks incredible. It's like How to Train Your Dragon levels of gorgeous. And after that, you never see it again. I think they were so focused on making a road trip movie that they forgot that it's also a fantasy film. Another negative that I have with this movie is there's a dispute between Ian and Barley that slows the second act to an absolute crawl. It's a mistake that makes Barley look stubborn and selfish, and it's really only there to extend the runtime because there's another scene where the two brothers do have another big fight, but it's actually genuinely emotional. You could have taken this first dispute out, and it wouldn't have affected a single thing. With that being said, I do have one last positive to say about the movie. One of the biggest deciding factors for a movie is how I judge whether it made me cry. And the ending. I'm not going to spoil it because, one, it's brand new, and two, you can literally log on to Disney Plus right now and watch it. But the ending with the main character's dad is so emotional, but it wasn't in a way I was expecting. They took a bittersweet approach, and frankly, I admire Pixar for having the guts to not necessarily tell the viewer what they want to hear. And I gotta tell you, in the third act, I wept like a baby and just in waves at the very end. Because just back to back, they hit you with very specific areas in our hearts that we all struggle with in some way or another when it comes to family. And I think that's the one thing that Pixar shines through with almost every last one of their movies, is they have a very clear understanding of the human psyche and presenting sort of the sadder areas of our minds in a way that kids and adults can easily understand. Onward is definitely a B-level Pixar movie, but it's like a really strong B-level. It has so much potential for being one of the greats, but lacks the required focus to drive home certain themes at the same level of success as something like Coco or Inside Out.
It's not the worst Pixar movie in the world, Coco.
The physical comedy is hilarious, and the characters are portrayed in fresh and unique ways. But the scenery by and large is pretty boring except for the last 10 minutes or so, and the sibling rivalry between Tom Holland and Chris Pratt has some good elements, but other times the tension either feels half-baked or absolutely contrived out of thin air. This movie would have gotten a much lower score, but the tear factor always gets the best of me. And so, I'm going to give Onward a 7 out of 10. If you're hearing my voice, that means you made it to the end of this podcast. Good job, buddy. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer listening on the go, subscribe to my podcast, both of which are called Higgs Flicks, so you should be able to find it. But anyway, I'm Higgs, this has been my flick, and thanks for listening.